Good afternoon. My name is James Anthony, and I'm Dean of the Division of Graduate Education and Postdoctoral Affairs here at UC San Diego. And I want to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon in this town hall, during which we will discuss the implementation of the contracts for GSRs, ASEs, and postdoctoral scholars. I want to remind you that we have posted a frequently asked questions resource. We will put the link here in a moment, and many questions were solicited from the campus community, and we've attempted to answer as many of those questions as possible on this resource. It is a resource that will continue to be updated, so I would advise you to check it regularly. And in fact, after today's town hall, we will likely get some additional questions that we will want to add to that resource. The agenda for today is rather straightforward. We're going to hear from 5 speakers who will each present briefly some content, some important information that we would like to pass along to you. And then we're going to leave ample time over the course of this hour together to answer questions that many of you have submitted in advance. One additional item I want to let you know is that Senior Associate Dean Judy Kim and I have begun scheduling appointments with each of the school deans in order to begin discussing a variety of issues regarding the implementation of these contracts. Those deans will have their conversations with us first, and then we will invite them to, of course, have detailed conversations with their respective department chairs and program officers. So I want to go over some housekeeping notes, which are important for us. Some of the questions that were submitted to us during registration, we've been able to answer, and we will get through as many of those as possible. However, you may have some questions that occur to you as you're listening to the webinar today. And so we ask you to feel free to use the Q&A window to submit these additional questions for our panelists. We have several people working behind the scenes to take a look at those questions. The ones that we're able to respond to, we will respond to today, but certainly if we're not able to respond to your particular question, we will have a record of them and we will respond to them asynchronously at another time, perhaps even on our FAQ resource. And in general, due to just the time limitations we have today, we won't be able to answer everything that's submitted to us, but please rest assured we will get to your questions through the FAQ resource. All right, an additional housekeeping note is today's webinar has live captioning available in 2 ways. First, you can click on the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen and select Show Subtitles, or you can click on the link that is pasted into the chat. Okay, with all of that out of the way, I'd like to now introduce Executive Vice Chancellor Elizabeth Simmons, who will provide a brief overview and presentation to us. Elizabeth Simmons.
Thanks very much, Jim. Can we go to the first slide, please? Perfect. So I'm glad to have the chance to talk with you today. If we can go to the next slide, please. So what we are all focused on is making sure that we keep our graduate programs and our research programs strong. As a university, this is absolutely essential, and everything we're doing is focused towards that end. We have to make decisions for the short term to get through spring of 23 appropriately. We have to figure out graduate admissions for fall 23, and we'll be handling the coming academic year as a kind of transition year. And then we will, over the longer term, need to figure out how to handle a lot of questions around graduate education and graduate funding and for 24, 25 and beyond. And we will take the necessary time and consultation to do that. So on the next slide, just a point of kind of financial planning background. And what it boils down to is that we handle funding requests by going up the chain of authority. A chair would consider a request. If they can't fund a request fully, they wouldn't turn down the high priority, strong request. Instead, they would take it to their dean Likewise, if the dean can't handle all of it, they won't say no. They will take it to their vice chancellor and so on up the chain. Nobody simply says no until it's gone all the way up the chain, if necessary, to the chancellor. And we work together to fund important matters. So with that as background, let's go to the next slide. I want to talk quickly about spring 23 and how we're going to handle that. So here we go. So for spring 23, I'll just remind folks of the context. We continue to offer a 5-year support package for the academic year quarters for doctoral students. It's 3 years for MFA students. Tuition and fees for any academic year quarter that's covered by one of those support packages are proportionately charged across employment sources. We have a clearly defined minimum support level for any of those covered academic quarters, mostly determined by the contracts. And for spring, the cost changes are within a range that the departments ought to be able to plan to support from their current dollars that they already have and any discretionary funds at their disposal. But if a department has a challenge, what they need to do is go to their dean. And if the dean has a challenge, they go to the appropriate academic vice chancellor. And remember, departments have flexibility in allocating funds to make sure that students are supported. So that's spring. If we now go to the next slide, we'll start thinking about the transition year, 23-24, and graduate admissions. So the principles I talked about a minute ago still apply, and so do the basics about financial planning. Now, a couple weeks ago, we asked units to take 2 steps as part of initial planning. And first, we asked them to take a very conservative look, assuming that there were not additional new resources, and to take account of the new pay rates and so on set by the contracts, and think about how that might impact their cohort size. That was a very conservative scenario. So now we can build on those to make clearer plans because we have more information since a couple weeks have passed. And what we'll be doing is building a model where we all contribute at every level: PIs, departments, schools, vice chancellors, and the chancellor, to one-time measures that we need to appropriately fund things in 23-24 as a transition year in a way that will maintain the strength of our graduate education and our research programs. And that will give us some time also to continue collaboratively planning with other administrators and with the academic senate for the long term. So on the next page, let me give you some updated information. So this is how we'll think about this collaborative model for the transition year. So in setting the fall 23 graduate cohort sizes, there would be 3 different pieces to think of. The one listed last is block grant. So the fall 23 block grant sizes will be maintained at the fall 22 level. So that's something that's very simple. In thinking about TA support, now, given the new higher rates for TAs, if no additional funding were provided, the TA cohort would have to drop by 30%. And that's not really, we don't really think that would be desirable. But on the other hand, maintaining the full TA cohort at the same strength, at the same size, at the new rates is not financially possible. So the chancellor and I conferred with the academic senate and reached a solution whereby for 23-24, the campus will fund the new TA rates, but for 15 fewer TA headcount than in the current academic year. And that's for the schools and the colleges. And then finally, GSR support, and actually this goes over into postdocs a bit. We recognize that many PIs have grants that are already in progress, that the budget can't be changed because the grant has already been awarded. And we anticipate that over the next 3 years, the total impact will be about a $15 million shortage in funding to cover the higher GSR and postdoc costs. So that's as if it were about $5 million a year for 3 years, roughly speaking. So we expect that PIs will rebudget as much as possible, that they will apply their discretionary funds to cover their GSRs and their postdocs as much as possible. And when they run out of those sorts of resources, we will enable PIs who are in need to apply for assistance using that same kind of go up the chain of authority model. And so the chancellor and the academic VCs will jointly, for the entire university, contribute up to $10 million if that turns out to be needed, to help the departments and schools do their meet funding requests. So the departments and schools will build on what the PIs have put in place. And then, if necessary, the chancellor and VCs have put some money in place where we will also contribute. So this will be a joint effort, and we will collaboratively keep our education and research programs strong. I want to just mention, so one would think about all three of these pieces, and units should think about all three of these pieces and work with Dean Antony and his team to adjust fall admissions cohorts according to all of this new financial information. And it's the collaboration among all of us, among the faculty PIs, the administrators, all the way up to the vice chancellors and the chancellor, that's going to make it possible. And now the last slide, just noting that to think about the future of, a bit of a typo, but 24, 25 and beyond. With the Senate leadership, we're working on a charge for a Senate admin work group to collaboratively think about the future in the best tradition of how we do work together at UC San Diego. So I look forward to working with all of you on this to keep our graduate education and research programs strong. Thanks, Jim. Back to you.
Thank you, EVC Simmons, for that helpful overview of the campus's current response during this initial year and in the long term. So now what I'd like to do is hand it off to our next colleagues. We've got 4 more colleagues to make presentations. The first person we're going to hear from is Jaime High from Labor Relations. Jaime?
Thank you, Dean Antony, and welcome all for attending this webinar. First, I want to thank everyone for your patience while we are dealing with the implementation of all these contracts, and especially the GSR contract, which is totally brand new. We as a campus are working with our partners up at Office of the President, and we're also very collaborative here at the campus between my office, GEPA, academic personnel, research affairs, to really put together the information everyone needs to help these contracts go forward. And please, please, please keep watching the FAQ, because as we get updates, we are trying to update that FAQ and get you the information as fast as we can. If you have any questions, please reach out to me personally. My email address is jhi@ucsd.edu, or our general labor relations inbox, which is laborrelations@ucsd.edu. The contract durations are important because the 2 contracts for the graduate student employees are until May 31st of 2025. And so that will give us an opportunity to really see how some of these new concepts are coming into the contract work, and really see how the graduate student researcher contract is working out. The 2 career employee contracts, or quasi-career employee contracts, the postdocs and academic researchers, they're a little bit longer. They go until September 30th, 2027. Sounds weird to say 2027. Next slide, please. The other thing I want to quickly cover, because it's on everyone's mind, is the schedule of wage increases. And I'm just going to cover it for the 2 graduate student employment contracts. my colleague Jennifer Bork will cover the ones for the postdoc later in the presentation. The first increase happens 90 days after ratification, which is around April 1st of 2023. And that will be approximately a 7.5%. Reason why I say approximately is because for the graduate student researchers, there is some change to the scale that is happening, but it should be around that amount. The next big increase is fall of 2023. I think it's about October 1st of 2023. That's when the ASEs are going to see a bigger increase. It's about 25.1%. Again, it's approximate because there is a change in the scale going on. And GSRs will be approximately 6.4%. Again, it's because of the way the scales are being done. And also in fall of 2023, that's when experience-based steps for both of these contracts will start. Stay tuned for more about experience steps as we start doing training on these two contracts. Then finally, for fall of 2024, the ACs will be approximately 16.7%, and the GSRs will be approximately 6.4%. There will be training on these two contracts. We're being told it should be scheduled towards the end of February, beginning of March, and that is being coordinated with the Office of the President. So stay tuned for information about those trainings. And I will turn it back to Dean Antony. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jaime. We appreciate all the information. Now we're going to turn to Associate Vice Chancellor Cindy Palmer, who will give us some additional content. Cindy?
Sorry, a little tech difficulties there. I first want to reiterate Jaime's thanks to everyone for your patience as we work through this process, and especially for your help with the attestation process and for the great questions that have been generated as part of this. We understand that this was a difficult and is a difficult, sensitive task, and we appreciate your time and attention. Academic personnel and labor relations are continuing to accept forms that are submitted while we wait for instruction from OP. And until then, we have asked units not to enter any pay adjustments into the payroll system. As you can imagine, we've received a variety of responses in the forms, and we're using this time to organize the information that we have received. And we'll reach out to other units and other central offices to assist us in that process. Super short slide, but again, I just wanted to thank you. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for your patience as we wait for additional instruction from Office of the President. And we are committed to distributing all that we receive as soon as we get it. In the meanwhile, if you have any other questions, please send them to academic personnel. If you receive any other forms of submissions, please submit them again to academic personnel and labor relations. Thank you. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you so much, AVC Palmer. Next, we're going to hear from Director of Postdoctoral Affairs, Jen Bork. Jen, are you on the Zoom? Jen Bork?
Yep, sorry. Can you hear me?
We sure can. Please
Okay,
proceed.
thank you. Sorry, I was going through my whole spiel and I was unmuted. So good afternoon, everyone. For those who are not familiar, the PX contract covers postdocs in the 5 postdoctoral scholar title codes. It does not include those in the clinical fellows. So this is a system-wide contract and applies to all UC campuses, including the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. And as Jaime mentioned, the contract will go through September 30th of 2027. So for this town hall, I'm only going to cover 4 main articles. The Article 2 for appointments, Article 4 compensation, Article 12 leave of absence, and the new Article 37 childcare reimbursement. Next slide, please. So Article 2 appointments. A major goal for the UAW was to provide postdocs some stability with longer appointments. We couldn't agree on their demand for 5-year appointments, but we were able to settle on 2-year initial appointments with a minimum of 1-year reappointments. These are just the minimum required durations, and PIs are allowed to offer longer appointments if that makes sense for their research program. Changing the duration of the initial appointment was hotly debated. However, when we looked at our campus data, most postdocs were given 1-year initial appointments and then given a 2-year reappointment. So there wasn't a big change for our practice. Now, we do understand that there is concern over committing to 2 years for the initial appointment. So we wanted to provide postdocs some stability while providing the PIs the flexibility that they may need. So the new contract includes a release provision. The PI can release the postdoc at the 1-year mark with a 30-day notice. The release can be for almost any reason, as long as it's lawful. For example, you can't discriminate against protected classes. If there is a more appropriate pathway for termination, that should be followed. For example, if it's a research misconduct case, or if it's a lack of funding, then you would process through a layoff. Another change is the allowable reasons for less than minimum duration. And so they removed lack of funding and change in PI as valid reasons. And so for a new appointment in general, the postdoc must be given a 2-year initial appointment. If funding runs out, the PI must initiate a layoff. Let's see, next slide, please. Compensation. So Article 4 is the compensation. This is where the biggest change is happening in the contract. The UC postdoc salary scale is no longer tied to the NIH NRSA stipend scale. When the first postdoc contract was negotiated, UC tied the salary scale to NIH's NRSA scale. It made sense at the time because the NRSA scale was a national standard. But over the years, we kept the scale, but changed the starting rate for the NRSA, or the starting level for the UC scale, to the NRSA level 2 rate. It helped us remain competitive. But the problem was we never knew when NIH would announce a new NRSA scale, and UC was required to implement the new scale at the first of the following month after the NIH's announcement. Several times we had to scramble to implement the scale and amend offers within a week or even a few days after a holiday break. So in the new contract, the salary scale rates and the timing are set for the 5 years of the contract. This makes it more predictable and easier to budget. Another change is that there is now only one salary scale at a time. Previously, we had 2 active salary scales. So for example, the last salary scale changed on May 1st, 22. Those appointments on May 1 or later was on that scale, but prior appointments were on the older February 1, 2021 scale. So that meant 2 postdocs in the same lab at the step 0 could be paid on different rates on different scales. Under the new contract, there will only be 1 scale at a time. So postdocs at the same level would be paid at the same rate. And I'll go over this on the next slide. The last change to the compensation is that if a postdoc is paid off scale, they will receive a 3% increase or to the next step, whichever is greater. Next slide, please. So this chart shows when a postdoc will transition to the next experience level. The first new salary scale is effective April 1st, 2023, which is a transition scale to get everyone on the new 1 scale system. Then all future salary scales are effective October 1st with a 3.5 increase each year. Postdocs will receive their experience level increase on April 1st or October 1st, depending on their higher month, or a day if it's in April, as you can see from the green box. So rather than being given their reappointment and a salary increase on the reappointment date, it's actually going to be April 1st or October 1st, depending on where they fall. And then they will all get a range adjustment on October. So how does this work? Here's an example. If a postdoc is hired on April 1st, 2023 at level 0, which is highlighted in the first green box, on October 1st, 2023, they will receive a range adjustment and experience level increase to level 1. So this is earlier than the 1-year anniversary. So this is a huge change in the concept. Then all future salary increases will be October 1st. If a postdoc is hired on October 2nd, if a postdoc is hired on April 2nd up to April 30th at level 0, then on October 1st of 2023, they will receive a range adjustment only. Then on April 1st, 2024, they will receive an experience level increase to level 1. And all future salary increases will be April 1st. with a range adjustment every October. So this means that in the first year of a postdoc's appointment, they may get their first increase in less than 12 months. But once they are on either an April or October cycle, they will then get their experience increase every 12 months, and then a range adjustment in October. Next slide, please. Leave of absence. So major change in the leave of absence is the replacement of the paid parental leave benefit, which provided 4 weeks of paid leave to bond with a newborn or adopted child. In the new contract, there is a new concept called the postdoc paid family leave benefit, which will provide 8 weeks of paid leave per calendar year for the following reasons: to bond with a newborn or adopted child, military child giver leave, qualifying extensive leave, care for family member with a serious health condition. There is no FML required for this benefit, which is different than the system-wide PFCB benefit. And this benefit is available on day 1 of the postdoc's appointment. The last article I want to talk about is a child care reimbursement program. This is a brand new article, but you may be familiar with the concept in the program, as graduate students have had this benefit for the last several years. And then in 2021, NIH and RSA included this benefit on their fellowships, and in 2022 on their training grants. So for the UC program, it provides $2,500 in the first year for the program for eligible child care expenses. And then each year of the contract, that amount is increased by $100. Eligible expenses would be for a licensed child care provider, and the dependent child must be 12 years or under. This program also provides the same amount of money for child care related expenses when a postdoc is on approved business travel. So, for example, if a postdoc is giving a presentation at a conference or has a newborn, the funds can be used to temporarily pay a child care provider at home, or even to pay for the travel for the child care or the child care provider. Now, it's important to know that this is, it has to be used only for approved business travel. So we're still working on the details of this program, and more information will be provided shortly. And the last thing I want to mention is that this benefit will be paid through the CBR, the composite benefit rates. So thank you.
Thank you so much. The last specialist we're going to hear from is ABC Faith Hawkins. Faith?
Thank you very much, Dean Anthony. And I'm just here to talk a little bit about the positions that are funded on grants and how we're going to handle them. So first off, and most importantly, these are complex issues, and we're in the process of developing guidance, both for in-flight awards that are already approved and active, and guidance for developing proposals for new funding. And that guidance will be forthcoming hopefully in the next several days. Secondly, in thinking about how to accommodate the costs of the new compensation, the first step will be for PIs to explore whether or not they can reallocate funds within their approved budgets without reducing their project scope. This is going to vary a little bit by agency and by budget and by mechanism. So you should consult either with your fund manager, your sponsored program finance officer, or your agency to make sure about what you can do there. PIs should next use their discretionary funds available to them for costs that in-flight grants can't cover through reallocation. After that, PIs will be able to apply for department, school, or VC funding to cover some costs that in-flight grants and other sources can't cover. We're working on an application process and criteria and guidance for that, and hope to have that out within a couple of weeks. Next slide, please. As you work to think about reallocating your in-flight grant budgets, you're going to have to think about several things. So just keep in mind what type of award the GSR postdocs or academic researcher is on. There are awards that have total capped budgets, and it would be difficult or impossible to request additional funding. There are awards that have different restrictions. Training grants have different restrictions than other kinds of grants. Individual fellowship grants, career development grants, et cetera. Yeah, again, there's so many different types of grants and mechanisms. Really be in touch with the experts either at your funding agency or in your sponsored project finance team. Grants also classify different appointments as either stipends or salaries, and that creates different situations as well. Stipends, for instance, are typically set by the funding agency and are usually capped. There's not much flexibility there. Salaries do generally have more flexibility, and you can do more reallocation of salaries based on the individual organizational policy. And then you're also going to have to think about how specific elements of these agreements fit within granting agency budgets. There are, for instance, some granting agencies that will not allow certain charges to grants like childcare or transportation. We're working on making sure that our guidance clarifies this as much as we can. And so we ask your patience. There are a lot of different agencies to check with. Please do know that all of our senior leaders and indeed partners around the system are working together to talk to agencies, to try to create language for PIs to talk to agencies and their project officers and smooth that communication path so that we can make these adjustments as smoothly and evenly as we can. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much for that excellent information. Now it's time to move on to the question and answer segment of our webinar, and I invite all of our panelists to turn on their video. The way we're going to do this is during registration, attendees had an opportunity to submit questions for our panelists to answer. We've gone through all of those questions and selected some of the most popular ones that we know we can answer today. Any ones that we're not able to get to, we will certainly still answer in a different forum, most likely on the FAQ resource that we've referenced and will continue to reference. And also, if you have a question now, please use the Q&A window to submit those additional questions. As many of you can see, we have a lot of excellent folks behind the scenes working to answer as many of those as we're able to answer. Due to time limitations, I'm sorry that we won't be able to get to every single question that was submitted, but as I've said, we'll make sure to answer those as soon as possible in a different forum. Okay, so we're going to get right to the questions. The first question is for Faith. Will the contract terms change the NIH T32 unallowable benefits costs?
Great question. And so just as background for postdocs, there are certain unallowable benefits that aren't allowed on these grants. Workers' comp is one example. Life and accidental death and dismemberment insurance are not allowed on these grants. We are trying to determine if the child care subsidy will fall into that category. And if it is added to the composite benefit rate and is unallowable, that may also have to be moved to other sources for funding, which those other unallowed benefits are already being done. So more information to come on that. It's a question that we're working on.
Thank you so much, Faith. Appreciate it. The next question is for Tiffany with potential backup from Jaime at LR. Will the university be covering the fees for 25% hires?
The remission for GSRs and ASEs is a benefit of employment guaranteed by the contracts for employees who are appointed at least 25%. Except in very rare cases, the cost of that remission is posted to the same funding as the gross salary. There are some exceptions when there are sponsor guidelines that require us to do something different, but in general, those costs are attributed to the same source as the salary payment.
Thank you, Tiffany. The next three questions actually are for me, so forgive me, you're going to hear a lot. The first question is, how are the schools dealing with the shift in the number of ASEs? GEPA, our division, is setting up meetings with the deans of each school to discuss this very thing. It's all being discussed first with the deans and then eventually with the chairs. And as soon as strategies are decided at the school level, they will be communicated in more detail. The next great question is, what help will be provided to joint doctoral programs, JDPs, to pay the higher graduate student salaries agreed in the new contracts? And the answer to that question is JDP programs, as always, should work with my division, GEPA, to examine all their sources of funding and really to determine what strategies to use in that particular situation. The next question is, how will this impact funding for students receiving SEED, San Diego, or Cota Robles fellowships? This is answered in the FAQ, but in a nutshell, what I'd like to say is we're actively reviewing that right now within GEPA. And as soon as we have an answer, we will tell the departments who have recipients of these fellowships, and of course, tell the recipients themselves. The next question is for Tiff. Here it is. Is there any chance that the child care reimbursement will be required to be covered by the funder of the salary?
So we don't have an update for the ASEs and GSRs at this time. We've reached out for additional guidance and we'll post the answer to the FAQ as soon as we can. For postdocs, the child care subsidy is included in the CBR rates, which are the centralized benefit rates, which are charged to salary funding sources. So again, those costs will follow salary for postdocs.
Thank you, Tiff. The next question we received will go to Jaime. Jaime, the new contract says we are required to be employed at 50%. Will we be back paid for the months that fall under this new contract?
Thank you, Dean Anthony. So there will be no back pay for anything prior to the ratification. And the way the contract says it's there is no requirement for 50% appointments. It says the appointment percentage should be commensurate with the workload. And so that is the way the new contract works with GSRs and has been working with ASEs.
Thank you, Jaime. And I actually think you answered our next question, but you may wish to reinforce it. How will hours worked or effort be calculated for graduate student workers?
Exactly. It's like it has been for ASEs for years and years, and it's going to be the same for the GSRs. Workload needs to be commensurate with your appointment percentage, and there'll be more information about that in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is actually for me, and it has to do with joint doctoral programs again. How will the new contracts affect students who are in joint doctoral programs? The new contracts only affect students who are appointed to do work on the UC San Diego campus in either of the categories named under the collective bargaining agreements, and only during the specific academic terms when that work is being performed. All other JDP students are not covered under those collective bargaining agreements. Jaime, we're going back to you for this question. Are the 2022-23 rates effective spring 2023? Or are they retroactive to fall 22 and winter 23?
They are effective for spring of 2023, specifically April 1st is when the new rates will go into effect. And then obviously come October of 2023, there'll be another increase as I stated in my presentation.
Thank you again, Jaime. The next two questions, we're going to, just for convenience, post a couple of links for you. Both of these questions are for Cindy. Question one, when will new updates of the postdoc salary scale and GSR scales appear on Blink?
Important information, Jim, and I think we're going to put the link in for the new postdoctoral salary scales that are effective April 1. And then the others that should be available this week, but we do have some links in chat. Are they there?
Thank you. And similarly, what are the new pay rates and when will they be effective?
Equally important information, and we've already answered that in our FAQs, which we should also have a link to in chat. There we go.
Thanks. Jaime, we're going back to you. Will there be a population-specific training, for example, training specific to update the postdocs, training specific to GSRs, et cetera, et cetera?
Thank you, Dean Anthony. Yes, this coming Thursday, which is tomorrow from 9:30 to 11 a.m., our campus will be holding a training for the postdocs and the academic researchers. There will be specific training for the GSRs and academic student employees, hopefully end of February, beginning of March, but those dates are still being set, so stay tuned.
Once again, thank you, Jamie. This next question is for you, Faith. Does the Office of Research Affairs support the campus research community with award questions, intramural or extramural?
Absolutely. We will support you with any questions we can answer. We also partner additionally with the Sponsored Programs Finance Office, who can also help with some of the questions on awards. So use all the resources you can to help find answers to the questions, and look for FAQs from us, which will be coming out soon.
Thank you, Faith. This one's for Jen. Faith, you might want to back up as well. What is the 2-year postdoc minimum, and how does that affect grants that might be expiring or will expire?
If that is regarding the duration of the appointments, so the initial appointment is for 2 years, and they have to be appointed for those 2 years. If there is a lack of funding, then the appropriate process would be a layoff.
Thank you. This next question is for Faith and Tiffany, backing each other up. When will we see retroactive rates on the OFC reports?
So this question's a bit specific depending on the population that you're supporting or that are paid on your grant. I would advise everyone to check the FAQ for the salary scales and when they're effective, because that's going to impact when you see it show up on your ledgers. For researchers, the change is effective in July. So we expect the July dopes, which are at the end of the month, beginning of August. For the postdocs, it's going to vary by their anniversary date or their first scale increase. So it could be as early as late April or early May that you start to see changes. And for the graduate students, ASEs and GSRs, we anticipate beginning with the April 23 dopes. So late April, early May, it will start to show on the ledgers.
Thank you. There is one question that I accidentally skipped here. Will we continue to offer 5-year support package for doctoral students? Is this 5 years of consecutive support? And the answer is yes, we will maintain our commitment to 5-year support for PhD students and 3-year support for MFA students. Jamie, I'm going to come back to you for a question. I am a project scientist and expecting a step increase on June 30th. Will the salary increase be on top of my step increase?
So if an academic researcher is up for a merit review effective July 1st of 2023, their advancement will be on the next range adjusted, which would be July 1st of 2023, that scale.
Okay, thank you. This one is for Tiff. Departments have flexibility in how they allocate funds from different sources to support their students. Does this mean that we can use block grant funding to cover ASEs? Our understanding is that all grad support funding is fungible as long as it is being used to support graduate students.
Yes, that understanding is correct. It is fungible. The funds should go direct to student support.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'll take the next question. The new collective bargaining agreements, CBAs, have rendered our former 30K initiative moot. It's not technically moot because a step 1 ASE next year is just under 30K. Does that mean we don't need to guarantee 30K funding anymore? So effective immediately, we are no longer pursuing the 30K mandate. In a collective bargaining environment, the campus cannot mandate any benefits of employment that are not part of the contract. If a department wishes to pay students more than they would earn in a specific contractual role, then they can do so in any of 3 acceptable ways. First, they can consider appointing the worker at a higher step. Second, they can consider offering a summer appointment that follows the contractual parameters for the role. Or third, they can provide that student with additional non-work-based fellowship dollars for which there is no work requirement. Okay, I'm going to go to this question. How will the steps be determined for TA appointments, also what we call ASE. Is this determined at the department level, or is experience based on the number of times the student has TA'd? Jaime, I'm going to give you this one, but Courtney and Tiff, feel free to chime in.
Thank you. So the steps will be determined for the April increases. I think they're being mapped on just like GSRs are. Come October 1st of 2023 is when the experience-based steps will start. And we will be providing more information at that time. The experience will be based upon the end of the spring term of 2023. But since we have some time to implement that, we will be putting out information and making sure everyone is aware of how that will go and how you should make those determinations. I do want to say that a department is always allowed to pay above what the step should be if they want. The contracts give us the baseline and we cannot fall below that, but departments always have the ability to pay more if they so choose.
Thank you, Jaime, very much. The next question is, how are salaries and benefits of undergraduate ASEs affected by the union negotiations? There's a bit of terminology there in the question that we'll need to make sure that we check because undergraduates are not by default considered ASEs. But I do understand the question as it's being asked. Undergraduates in an instructional role of some kind. So here's the answer. Undergrads may continue to be offered opportunities to engage in tutoring and the various instruction-like work of the past. However, it is important to keep in mind that the roles these undergraduates fill must be distinct enough from what is outlined in an ASE's job duties. Otherwise, that undergraduate may be considered to be filling an ASE role with all of its attendant benefits and responsibilities. Labor Relations and GEPA, my division, have already reached out to those schools that typically offer such opportunities to their undergraduates so that they can clarify their job descriptions and make sure they're setting expectations appropriately. The next question, what are the step equivalents to the new pay scale system? For example, step 8-9 GSR pay scale equivalent. Tiffany, can I ask you to take that question?
Sure. We have posted a very specific step-to-step PDF on the FAQ. So we'll drop that link in here again, but please consult the FAQ.
Thank you, Tiff. And going back to you again, Tiffany, the next question, will the new GSR and TA scales be incorporated into the UC Path system? And how do they, UC Path, plan on rolling out the new scales in that system?
The increases will be handled by a UC-wide salary range adjustment, and that range adjustment will appropriately collapse the existing GSR tables and expand the ASE tables. So more information on that to come. We'll post it to the FAQ when there's news.
Great, thank you very much. We have a couple of questions that are appearing in the Q&A that I'm going to look at here and ask some people to respond to, because I think it is something that we can respond to. There's a question about providing benefits of employment not in the contract and the dimensions of the graduate funding reform. A lot of that is answered in the FAQ. We're going to continue elaborating in the FAQ about each of those aspects of that question. Jaime, there's a clarifying question for you asking, did Jaime just say that we can pay above the TA rates if departments choose? Jaime, would you be willing to answer that question live here?
Yes, so departments always have the option, like I said, to pay above the TA rates if, you know, they have the money or, you know, they choose to do so. There's a lot of things to keep in mind when doing that. And I think if there's specific questions about that issue, you can email me and we can have a discussion about it. But the contract rates are always set as the floor and they're not the ceiling.
Great. And I assume, Jaime, if I may elaborate, that same guidance you just shared with us would apply for the GSRs?
Correct. It actually applies to, I think, all 4 groups. It's always the floor, but there should be a discussion to be had before making those decisions, and always reach out to myself in labor relations, Cindy Palmer, her office, Jen Bork, and we can discuss those issues because they're very fact specific.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask Tiffany whether she can answer this particular question, Tiffany and/or Courtney behind the scenes. Is there any guidance on how departments can process appointments for students in self-supporting programs who are employed under Title Code Student Researcher? Are they now eligible for GSR appointments?
I would need a little more specifics about that question. So please feel free to submit us a services and support ticket and we can look into exactly what the question is and help provide guidance.
Thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate that. Tiffany, before I lose you, can you remind everybody how they can submit ticketed questions, particularly our grad coordinators or anybody working as staff in the departments who might have questions that they need to give to your staff?
Absolutely. There are 2 ways. One is to go to the support portal and find us under students, submit a generic ticket and just put in there that you're looking for us. It'll get there. Slightly more efficient, if you have the email in your address book, is the grademployment@ucsd.edu email. That will also kick us a ticket.
Great. Thank you, Tiffany. And I want to thank everybody, all our panelists, both for answering these questions live right here on camera, and certainly all of our support team answering as many of the questions as possible behind the scenes. We have actually gotten through all the questions that were submitted. So thank you, everybody. Again, if you can all go to the FAQ resource, there is at the bottom of that FAQ resource also a link for you to be able to submit additional questions that you would like the campus to respond to. There's the link right there for you for the FAQ resource. And lastly, the recording of this webinar will be posted there as well on the FAQ resource. So thanks to all the presenters and guests for sharing their time today and the information that they provided. This concludes the ASE GSR Postdoc Contract Implementation Town Hall. And I want to thank you all and wish you a good rest of your day. Take care.